Ari Fleischer, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with Jim Acosta and the CNN correspondent's conduct when President Trump called on him at that presser. You were there in that room with President Bush. Was this different than the kinds of questions that Bush got?
Totally different. You know, it's one thing for reporters to be challenging, to be tough. That's their job. They do it all the time. It's another thing for them to use that room or the briefing room to espouse their personal policy preferences, their individual points of view. And that's what Jim Acosta has been doing since Donald Trump became president. And I think that, more than anything involving that physical altercation, which really was a nothing altercation, I think that is the rub of the matter. That's what's
But then he kept on talking. Like I'm talking over you now. He wouldn't give up the mic. But at the same time, was it an overreach or a misstep for the White House to suspend his credentials? Because that shifted the whole spotlight from whatever Jim Acosta did or didn't do to whether the White House is being punitive toward the press.
Look, in the Bush White House, you know, what I would have done was I'd have tried to just take advantage of that moment and say, well, Jim, I hope you get your op-ed published in the newspaper tonight. And then on to the next reporter and let them ask a question. I would deflect and try to use a little humor and try to make everybody laugh at him for being an obvious editorial writer instead of a neutral journalist. But the Trump White House does everything differently, and I'm not going to defend Jim Acosta. It is not the role of White House reporters to express their opinion. He makes other reporters in the room look bad when he's the one out there expressing his opinion, because that type of thing just amplifies onto everybody. The public hates it. Ask a question, ask a hard question. And you know what, Howie? What he could have done was simply, instead of saying the caravan is not an invasion, Mr. President, he could have said critics say,
some say, as opposed to I'm debating you. But let me move on now to the media furor over President Trump firing Jeff Sessions, naming on an acting basis his chief of staff, Matt Whitaker, who has a history of criticizing the Mueller investigation. Given the sensitivity of that probe, is the media freakout justified?
Look, I think it's appropriate to put scrutiny on whoever is going to be an acting attorney general, particularly in this environment. But then they've gone too far. The fact that he wrote opinion pieces, Tony Snow, the former White House press secretary, wrote a ton of opinion pieces, many of them negative about George Bush, and then got hired to be George Bush's press secretary. There's a history in Washington of people writing opinion pieces, sharing their thoughts that are not indicative of what they will do once they come into power. And I suspect that's the case here, but you wouldn't know it from the press coverage.
Right. Tony Snow, of course, also was a commentator for Fox News. Ari Fleischer bringing his perspective from the White House podium in years past. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.